He was just an old man, walking home from the store, but when police pulled up he never stood a chance. They saw his skin, not his story, and in seconds he was gone. Hey, before we go deeper, where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and if you believe stories like this need to be told, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. Because what happened after, when his son arrived, was something no one saw coming. The air in Marion, Georgia, was thick with July heat and tension that couldn't be explained. Elderly Mr. Elijah Carter, 72 years old, with salt and pepper hair and a slow, deliberate walk, stepped out of his small blue house at 7:40. He carried a folded American flag in one hand and a tiny white envelope in the other, a letter addressed to his late wife's grave. That morning was supposed to be quiet, but it would change the town forever. Mr. Carter walked toward the community cemetery just 3 blocks down, waving at neighbors as he passed. Everyone knew him, a retired welder, deacon, and war veteran, who'd never raised his voice even in anger. But what happened next would prove that being good, kind, and elderly wasn't enough when your skin was black and your street had suddenly become the edge of a war zone. He was about to cross onto Sycamore and 5th when flashing lights and screeching tires filled the street. 2 police cruisers blocked the crosswalk, and a young white officer jumped out, his gun already drawn. "Hey, step back, old man," the cop barked. Mr. Carter paused, confused but not afraid. "Son, I'm just on my way to the cemetery." The second officer, larger, with a buzz cut and sunglasses, stepped out of the second car. "You match the description of a suspect. Keep your hands where we can see them." Elijah held up the envelope in his left hand. "You think an old man carrying a letter and a flag is a threat?" The younger cop's hand trembled on the trigger. "Don't move." Neighbors began peeking out their windows. A few pulled out their phones. Elijah lowered his hand slowly, thinking it would de-escalate things. But the moment he did, a gunshot rang out, then another, then silence. Elijah's body hit the sidewalk, flag and envelope fluttering down beside him, stained in blood. Just then, the sound of heavy boots echoed down the street, fast, heavy, determined. Someone had sprinted the entire way from the bus station 2 blocks out. A tall, muscular man in desert fatigues emerged from the alleyway, dropping his duffel bag the moment he saw his father on the ground. "Dad!" The officers turned, but before either could lift a weapon, the man had already covered the distance between them. With a single twist of the younger cop's wrist, his gun flew from his hand. The larger cop reached for his holster, but a brutal takedown landed him face first into the asphalt. The crowd that had gathered went silent. Every phone was recorded. The man knelt beside Elijah, cradling his father's bloodied head, his voice breaking. "Stay with me, Dad. Stay with me." The older man coughed weakly. They thought I was someone else." The younger officer whimpered on the ground. "We didn't know." He reached for something. The sun's glare could have melted steel. "That was a flag. My father served this country when your granddaddy was still learning to tie his boots." A woman from across the street whispered to her neighbor, Isn't that Major Carter?" Another neighbor nodded. "Darn right, that's James Carter, Delta Force." Within seconds, blue and red lights filled the street again, but this time not from small-town cruisers. Homeland Security SUVs, 2 unmarked black vans, and military personnel descended like a thunderstorm. Someone had made a call, someone high, and things were about to change. Sirens roared louder as the small neighborhood in Marion transformed into what looked like a war zone. James Carter, the Delta Force legend who just disarmed 2 officers in under 10 seconds, still knelt beside his father, tears streaking down his face. The flag Elijah had carried was now soaked in his blood, and the envelope for his wife lay crushed under a boot. James looked up. The crowd had grown. Some were filming, others were frozen in silence. No one dared speak. Everyone felt it. Something massive had just been unleashed. The 2 local cops, Officer Brad Mills and Sergeant Cooper Hayes, lay on the pavement, one groaning, the other in a daze. A third officer, who had just arrived late to the scene, looked at James and hesitated. Something in his gut told him this is not the man to draw a gun on. A black SUV screeched to a halt beside the cruiser. Out stepped a woman in a dark tactical suit, flanked by 2 federal agents in earpieces. She didn't wait for questions. James Carter. He stood, wiping blood from his hands. "Director Helen Ward, Special Operations Division. I received your call. Your father. He was unarmed, James growled. He was delivering a letter to my mother's grave. Ward glanced at the body, then at the two officers on the ground. And these men, they fired first. He raised a letter, and they thought it was a threat. Ward turned to the agents behind her. Secure the scene. I want those body cams pulled. Now, get me everyone's footage from the crowd too. Within seconds the agents moved. One reached for Officer Mills' body cam, ripping it from the vest. No warrant? The officer protested. You're suspended. You'll be lucky if this stops at suspension. Ward snapped. You just shot a decorated war hero's father in cold blood. The neighborhood buzzed with whisper. Who is she? That's federal, like top-level stuff. They're really here for him. James turned to the crowd. Please, everyone, step back. Let them help my father. Let them get justice. Two medics pushed through, with a stretcher. One of them recognized Elijah immediately. Mr. Carter, he said. Man taught me to weld back in high school. He's barely breathing, James said. I need him alive. As they loaded Elijah into the ambulance, the medic nodded solemnly. We'll do our best. The crowd finally broke silence. Someone clapped, another followed, and soon a ripple of respect echoed around James Carter, the man who'd returned home to protect his father, only to witness the worst of what he'd spent his whole life fighting against. Back at the police station, chaos erupted. Chief Riggins had just received word from Washington that 2 of his officers had been detained on federal orders. In under 20 minutes, every news outlet had the story. Retired black veteran shot by cops. Son is a Delta Force legend. Riggins slammed his coffee cup on the desk. What the hell happened out there? Inside the holding room, Officer Mills was sobbing. I thought he had a weapon. I thought you thought wrong. Director Ward's voice cut like ice as she walked in. You thought your fear justified force. You thought your badge gave you the right to pull the trigger without confirming facts. And now you've sparked a storm. In another room, Sergeant Hayes was quieter. I've been on the force 22 years. He matched the description. Ward didn't blink. You think skin color is a description? Hayes looked down. Meanwhile in the hospital, James stood over his father's bed. Elijah had survived the initial shooting, but was still unconscious, tubes snaking from his chest and nose. Machines beeped steadily, keeping rhythm with James's breath. A nurse approached cautiously. Miss Carter? Yeah? There's someone here to see you. He says he's from the Pentagon. James narrowed his eyes. Send him in. A tall, older black man entered in a crisp gray suit. Colonel Decker. We served together in Iraq. James stood straight. Decker extended a hand. I came to say thank you, and to warn you. The media knows. The story's gone viral. They're framing it 2 ways. Some say you were a hero. Others say you assaulted officers. James exhaled. Of course they are. Decker lowered his voice. And there's something else. We've intercepted chatter. White supremacy forums. They're organizing. They want to retaliate. To teach a lesson. James's jaw clenched. Let them come. No, Decker replied. We need to be smart. If they come, it won't just be words. It'll be with guns and hate. And the next time, it might not just be your father. That night, James returned to his father's house. Now surrounded by media vans and flashing cameras. He ignored them, but as he entered the living room, he saw it spray-painted on his front door. Go back to where you came from. He stared for a long moment. Then calmly, he walked into the back room. Opened a trunk. Inside a uniform, medals, maps, encrypted phones, and a black duffel bag filled with the tools of a man who'd survived 14 combat deployments. James Carter wasn't going to war. He was bringing it home. James Carter sat in the living room of his father's home, staring at the hateful words still etched across the door. He hadn't cleaned it. Not yet, not because he couldn't, but because the world needed to see it. The world needed to feel it. This wasn't just a hate crime, it was, and they picked the wrong man's father. The trunk lay open before him. James zipped it up, locking away the tools of warfare inside the black duffel. He stood, his face blank, jaw tight. The knock sounded at the back door. 3 quick taps. Coded. He opened it. Maya, a former intel officer from James's unit, stepped in, her brown eyes scanning the room. You're being watched, Every corner of this town is crawling with plainclothes and agitators. James nodded. I figured. That's why I called you. She pulled out a small tablet, swiping through a satellite image. There's a group stationed 3 blocks down. Proud Nation. Armed. Planning a march. James clenched his fists. They think they're brave until they meet trained courage. The hospital is on their route, she added. Your father is a sitting target. His eyes flared. He didn't speak. He just moved fast. Elijah Carter still lay unconscious in room 4 trim. A private security guard stood by the door, but James knew he wasn't enough. The man was shaking. He wasn't trained for a political hate group armed with semi-automatics. James entered the room, nodded at the guard, and moved to his father's side. He gently placed a small GPS device under the bed and pressed a button on his watch, linking Elijah's vitals to his own device. Dad, he whispered, I need you to hold on. I'll handle the rest. The heart monitor beeped steadily. Outside the hospital, a crowd had gathered. Not in support, they held flags and signs. Blue Lives Matter, stand your ground and work. At the edge of the crowd stood a tall man in a gray hoodie, recording every face. It was Zeke, a former Marine sniper James had once pulled from a firestorm in Kandahar. He spoke into a mic hidden in his collar. 6 armed at the front, 3 circling the emergency exit, 2 with long-range scopes on the parking deck. James replied in his earpiece, keep eyes on them. If they breach, you know what to do. Zeke gave a quiet nod, already issued. But the mayor wants it kept quiet, says it'll cause panic. Better panic than a massacre. She hesitated. There's one more thing. We pulled the body cam footage from the officers. Your father didn't just raise a letter, he saluted them. With his hand open, one of them said, don't move, boy, and pulled the trigger. James's lips barely moved. I want that footage public. I want the world to see what they killed him for. Already done. It went live 20 minutes ago. Back at the Carter house, the news networks buzzed with chaos. Body cam reveals retired black veteran saluted before being shot. Protesters gather outside hospital, met by armed veterans. Delta Force operative leads operation to protect father. James stood atop the roof of the hospital, watching it all unfold. Beside him, Maya held a drone controller. Thermals show movement at the north stairwell. James spoke into the mic. Zeke, confirm stairwell entry. Zeke, confirmed. 2 men, both armed, heading to ICU level. James moved. Inside the stairwell, the 2 Proud Nation members crept upward, holding pistols close. One muttered, easy target. Old man can't run. They reached the 4th floor, but they weren't alone. James emerged from the shadow. In one move, he disarmed the first, using his own momentum to slam him into the wall. The second raised his gun, but James was faster. He twisted the man's wrist until it cracked, then knocked him out cold. 2 guards ran up moments later. Secure them. Then bring their gear to Director Ward. I want names. Downstairs, the crowd surged forward. Someone threw a bottle. Another tossed a flare. Director Ward addressed the line of riot police. Hold your line. We don't fire unless fired upon. But then, from within the mob, gunfire. Everyone ducked. Screams rang out. Zeke spotted the shooter on the roof across the street. 3rd floor. Red jacket. Scoped rifle. James didn't wait. He sprinted to the stairwell, 3 steps at a time, reaching the top floor in seconds. He leaped across the small alley between the hospital and the adjacent building, landing hard on the other rooftop. The shooter turned, shocked. James tackled him. They rolled, fists flying, until James pinned him. Who sent you? The man grinned. You're not gonna like the answer. James hit him once more. Try me. Before he could respond, the man passed out. James stood, panting, staring down at the man's tattoo, a snake wrapped in stars. The mark of the Sentinel Order, a radical hate militia believed to be dissolved years ago. Apparently they weren't dead. They had just been waiting. The neighborhood was a storm of flashing red and blue lights, choppers hovering above, and sirens crying into the night. But through the chaos, Daniel King moved like a shadow, silent, unseen, unstoppable. He'd already disarmed the first officer who approached him with shaky bravado. The cop was now zip-tied to a lamppost, whimpering beneath a ripped vest. Daniel had warned the rest, stand down or go down. But protocol wasn't something the local PD let go of easily. Inside the station, Captain O'Reilly barked into the radio, sweat drenching his collar. "We got a hostile ex-military on the scene. I need backup. I need the feds, now." But by the time his words left his mouth, Daniel was already watching from the roof of the precinct. He studied the layout, counting every window, every exit. Years of Black Ops training had conditioned him to process chaos like puzzle pieces. His father's blood was still on the pavement, and in Daniel's mind, that was war. Daniel dropped down the fire escape like a panther, landing without a sound. He crept into the building from the boiler room. The janitor, a heavy-set man in his 60s, froze as Daniel raised a finger to his lips. "I'm not here to hurt you, just tell me where they're holding the body." The janitor nodded shakily and pointed down a corridor. "Cold room. Basement. Last door." Daniel moved fast. As he descended the creaky stairs, memories of his father flooded back, teaching him how to throw a punch, how to read people, how to keep calm, even when rage boiled inside. His boots hit the basement floor just as Officer Maxwell and two rookies rounded the corner. "You, hands up," Maxwell shouted, leveling his gun. Daniel didn't flinch. "You really want to do this?" Maxwell took a step forward. "You're interfering with an active." Too late. In one fluid motion, Daniel disarmed the first rookie, twisted Maxwell's wrist until the gun clattered to the ground, and shoved the third against the wall. None of them knew what hit them. He continued down the corridor, finding the cold room at the end. He pushed the door open and froze. There, beneath a thin sheet, lay his father. Daniel closed the door behind him. The room felt like a freezer, but he didn't notice the chill. All he saw was the man who taught him how to live. "I'm sorry, Pop," he whispered, kneeling beside the table. "I should have been here." But grief couldn't have him yet. Footsteps thundered upstairs. Reinforcements had arrived, but Daniel had already mapped his escape. He slipped out through the loading dock and disappeared into the alley, blending into the shadows. But he wasn't done, not even close. Within an hour, video footage from a nearby diner surfaced online, raw, unedited, and damning. It showed the exact moment two officers gunned down Elijah King as he reached for his wallet. The elderly man had done nothing wrong. Nothing. The footage exploded across social media. People took to the streets. Protesters held candles and signs. Murals of Elijah began to appear. The nation was waking up, but Daniel wasn't looking for headlines. He was looking for justice. He began tracking the two officers, Murphy and Hayes. One lived in the suburb, the other had gone silent, hiding in an out-of-town motel under a fake name. But Daniel had contacts, and more importantly, a mission. He found Murphy first. Late at night, the officer arrived at his house, only to find the door ajar. Inside, the lights were off. His wife and kids were gone, sent to her mother's place earlier. "Hello?" Murphy called. Silence. Then, "You thought no one would come for you." Murphy turned just in time to see a shadow move across the living room. Daniel stepped forward, face emotionless. "You shot an old man reaching for his wallet, and you lied." Murphy's knees buckled. "I was scared. I thought." "You thought wrong," Daniel cut in. "And now, the country knows." Just then a red dot flickered on Murphy's chest. SWAT had arrived outside. Daniel had tipped them off this time. He wanted the system to see what real justice looked like. He raised his hands as officers burst in. He'd made his point. Daniel didn't resist. As they cuffed him and dragged him out, reporters swarmed the street. Cameras flashed, but Daniel's eyes stayed locked on Murphy's. "This isn't over," Daniel said, and he meant it. A deep silence wrapped around the gas station like a burial shroud. The flashing lights were now overwhelmed by a single helicopter beam sweeping across the scene. The hum of blades overhead and boots on asphalt signaled something big had arrived. And from the helicopter descended a tall, muscular man in tactical gear. His boots hit the ground with a thud that silenced the remaining officers. He walked like someone used to commanding attention, but it wasn't his uniform that froze everyone. It was his face. "Is that Major Cole Benson?" officer whispered. "Delta Force." Cole didn't flinch. He walked straight to the lifeless body of his father, still lying cold on the pavement, and dropped to one knee. His gloved hand brushed across the old man's gray hair, and a crack broke in his otherwise stone-cold demeanor. Behind him, two cops began to explain. "Sir, it was a misunderstanding. He reached into his pocket. We thought he had a weapon. Cole stood up slowly. His eyes were quiet fire. You killed a man because you were afraid of his skin. Now you're going to answer for it. The scene erupted into organized chaos. The FBI, military, police, and civil rights investigators poured in. Cole had not come alone. One officer tried to slip away, but was caught by Cole's teammate, a silent, towering man in a desert camouflage uniform. No one was getting out. One by one, the cops involved were disarmed, cuffed, and read their rights. But Cole wasn't satisfied. He demanded the body cam footage be played on the nearby police cruiser's screen. As it rolled, the crowd watched in stunned silence. The footage was clear. The old man had been trying to hand over a prescription paper from his coat pocket. No aggression, no threat, just an old man, following instructions. Tears fell in the crowd. A woman gasped. Another dropped her phone. One of the cops who had pulled the trigger, a younger officer named Grant, collapsed to his knees. I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't mean to. Cole knelt beside him. Your fear killed him, and now your conscience will judge you harder than any court. By sunrise, news cameras swarmed the scene. Protesters lined up with candles and signs bearing the old man's name, Charles Benson. Major Cole stood behind the podium at the emergency press briefing. Cameras clicked. My father was a peaceful man, a church deacon, a retired teacher. He raised me to protect others. But today he wasn't protected. He was executed. And this ends now. Thunderous applause followed. The police chief resigned within the hour. The state attorney launched an immediate investigation. The president tweeted condolences and called for a national reform initiative. But for Cole, it wasn't about the headlines. It was about justice. For his father. For every father. That night, Cole stood alone beside the blood-stained pavement. You didn't die in vain, Dad, he whispered. I promise you that. Fade to black.